Billy Blue, my knight in shining brindle. Welcome to another episode of A Poet Reads to Write. Today I would like to begin my contribution to the 2025 Celtophile Readathon. Today I would like to begin my contribution to this wonderful readathon by looking at some poetry around the theme of the ache of love. I'm going to focus on Seamus Heaney, but I'm going to take a little look at what happened before Heaney and a little look at what came after him. Seamus Heaney, this wonderful book here that I have by Helen Vendler, the great Harvard professor of literature. This is a contribution that she made to the Modern Masters series, where she really looks at Heaney's poetry, his poetic career, the way his public and private lives fed into and nurtured that incredible body of work that he wrote, culminating, of course, in his own Nobel Prize for Literature. But this book by Helen Vendler, as well as looking at the poetic career of Heaney and trying to situate him into, world poetry, this is a book that in particular looks at Heaney's contribution to the writing of the lyric poem. So this is a marvelous book about, looking at what is lyric poetry and how did Heaney shape it and reshape it to suit his own ends. As well as looking at the poetry of the lyric, Helen Vendler makes a marvelous contribution to looking at how Heaney, in particular, redefined, what it is to write a modern-day sonnet and a modern-day elegy. Those poem forms in particular, the sonnet and the elegy, are really poetic forms, mediums that Heaney really made his own. And this work by Helen Vendler really looks at this contribution that Heaney made to reshaping, reimagining what poetry could be in a modern voice. Heaney was once asked, what is the point of poetry? What is it all about? Why spend a life writing poetry? In some ways, it seems like such a quirky, whimsical thing to center a life around, so outdated, out of touch. Heaney gave this response to the question, why poetry? This is what Heaney had to say. Listen to this. In one sense, the efficacy of poetry is nil. No lyric has ever stopped a tank. In another sense, it is unlimited. It is like writing in the sand, in the face of which accusers and accused are left speechless and renewed. I am thinking of Jesus' writing as it is recorded in the chapter 8 of John's Gospel, in which Jesus twice, in answer to the hectoring scribes and Pharisees, bends silently and writes with his finger on the ground. The evangelist does not say what he writes, but the writing, in addition to Jesus' answer, "He that is without sin among you, let him cast the first stone," leads the crowd, convicted by their own conscience, and makes them depart. The drawing of those characters is like poetry, a break with the usual life, but not an absconding from it. Poetry, like the writing, is arbitrary and makes time in every possible sense of the phrase. It does not say to the accusing crowd, to the helpless accused, now a solution will take place. It does not propose to be instrumental or effective. Instead, in the rift between what is going to happen and whatever we would wish to happen, Poetry holds attention for a space, functions not as distraction, but as pure concentration, a focus where our power to concentrate is concentrated back on ourselves. Oh boy, what an answer to the question, why poetry? Oh, I am addicted to Seamus Heaney and this little book by Helen Vendler in the Modern Masters series. It's a marvellous contribution to the appreciation of Heaney, to his contributions to world poetry, to the reimagining of what it is to write a lyric, an elegy, or a sonnet. It's a marvellous little examination of the poetics of Heaney. So what came before Heaney? James Joyce, that megamouth. Oh boy, where do you start with James Joyce? He completely bewilders and overwhelms. Not many people are aware, though, that as well as those amazing collections, novels and short stories, James Joyce began his writing life as a poet. And this is one tiny little thing that he wrote. Poems, Penyeach. Just the comic genius of that title. It's marvellous, isn't it? So this is just a really small little collection of some of the early stuff written by James Joyce, some of his early poetry. But listen to this. Oh my goodness. This is a little poem that he wrote called Tilly. The beginnings of the Celtic imagination. Oh boy. Tilly. He travels after a winter sun, urging the cattle along a cold red road, calling to them a voice they know. He drives his beasts above Cabra. The voice tells them home is warm. They moo and make brute music with their hoofs. He drives them with a flowering branch before him, smoke pluming their foreheads. Boar, bond of the herd, tonight stretch full by the fire. I bleed by the black stream for my torn bow. Oh boy, written in Dublin in 1904. What a poem, so close to the earth, to the rhythms, the cycles of the seasons, and oh boy. Here's another poem, She Weeps Over a Rahoon. I guess it's a type of love poem, a type of elegy. Rain on Rahoon falls softly, softly falling. Where my dark lover lies, sad is his voice that calls me, sadly calling at grey moonrise. Love, hear thou how soft, how sad his voice is ever calling, ever unanswered, and the dark rain falling, then as now. Dark too our hearts, O love, shall lie and cold, as his heart, sad heart, has lain under the moon-grey nettles, the black mould, and muttering rain. Oh, it's marvellous, isn't it? The richness of the language. Oh, that is such a delicate elegy of love, I guess, lost love. Boy. Oh, listen to this. You can't have a theme of the Celtic imagination, I guess, without returning eventually to religion and perhaps to the church. This is Joyce's contribution. He's imagining of this, imagining a reimagining of Celtic spirituality. Night Piece. Gaunt is gloom. The pale stars, their torches, enshrouded wave. Ghost fires from heaven's far verges, faint illume. Arches on soaring arches, night's sin-dark nave. Seraphim, the lost hosts awaken to service till in moonless gloom each lapses muted, dim, raised what she has and shaken her thurible. And long and loud to night's nave upsoaring, a stark knell tolls, and the bleak incense surges, cloud on cloud, void word from the adoring waste of souls. Oh boy, what a reimagining of Celtic spirituality. The poetry of James Joyce. The voice that came before the marvellous Seamus Heaney. Finally, we have arrived at Heaney. Oh boy. This is a poem I just had to begin with. This is Baby Heaney, one of the first things he ever wrote. A beautiful poem. In many ways, it's a poem about creativity, about the writing of poems. But it's also a beautiful poem, a love poem in a sense, to his own father, to the labouring life of his father. It's a marvellous poem called Digging. What a simple, unadorned title. But listen to this. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests snug as a gun. Under my window, a clean rasping sound when the spade sinks into gravelling ground. My father digging, I look down till he's straining rump among the flower beds, bends low, comes up 20 years away, stooping in rhythm through potato drills where he was digging. The horse boot nestled on the lug, the shaft against the inside knee was levered firmly. He rooted out tall tops, buried the bright edge deep to scatter new potatoes that we picked, loving their cool hardness in our hands. By God, the old man could handle a spade, just like his old man. My grandfather cut more turf in a day than any other man on Tuna's bog. Once I carried him milk in a bottle, corked sloppily with paper. He straightened up to drink it, then fell to right away, nicking and slicing neatly, heaving sods over his shoulder, going down and down for the good turf, digging. The cold smell of potato mould, the squelch and slap of soggy peat, the curt cuts of an edge, through living roots awaken in my head, but I've no spade to follow men like them. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests. I'll dig with it. Oh, what a marvellous poem. So richly dramatic and evocative, isn't it? An amazing poem of love for a father and a grandfather and of the creative process itself. What a poem. It reminds you, I guess, of Ted Hughes's marvellous The Thought Fox, doesn't it? Seamus Heaney digging. Baby Seamus Heaney digging. All right, now we get to the mature man. This is what it's all about. Oh boy, the mature Seamus Heaney, where every poem really is a spell, a magic trick of sound, of the rise and fall of syllables, of alliteration and rhyme. If you can, the first time you listen to these poems, you really need to tune off the ear for working out what the poem means and just listen to the spell of the sounds. Turn off the meaning mind and just give yourself to the spell of sound. The second time you hear it, try and work out what the poem means. Oh boy, every poem is a spell with the mature Heaney. Out of Shot. These are poems from his wonderful later collection, District and Circle. Out of Shot. November morning, sunshine on my back. This clear bell Sunday, elbows lodged, strut firm on the unseasonably warm top bar of a gate, inspecting livestock, catching gleams of the distant Viking Vic, of Wicklow Bay, thinking scriptorium, Norse raids, night dreads, and that fierce raider's poem about storm on the Irish Sea, so no attack in the small hours of next morning. Thinking shock out of the blue or blackout, the staggered walk of a donkey on the TV news last night, loosed from a cart that had loosed 5 mortar shells in a bazaar district, wandering out of shot, lost to its owners, lost for its sunlit hills. Oh, the way Heaney can approach the violence of modern day Ireland, but look at it obliquely, so subtly, with so much nuance, through the lens of the Viking past or of the peat boggies, those Iron Age human sacrifices. It's just incredible writing, isn't it? On the spot. A coal clutch, a whole nestful, all but hidden in last year's autumn leaf mound, and I knew by the mattress and stillness of them, rotten, making death sweet of a morning dew, that didn't so much shine the shells as damp them. I was down on my hands and knees, there in the wet, grass under the hedge, adoring it. Early riser, busy reaching in and used to finding warm eggs. But instead, this sudden polar stud and stigma and dawn stone circle chill in my mortified right hand, proof positive of what conspired on the spot to addle matter in its planetary standoff. Oh boy. Every poem is just so rich. Planting the alder. For the dark, dulled argent, roundly wrapped and pigeon-collared, from the splitter-splatter guttering, rain flirt leaves, from the snub and clot of the first green cones, smelted emerald, chlorophyll. From the scud and scat of cones in winter, so rattle-skinned, so fossil brittle, from the alderwood, flame red, when torn branch from branch, but mostly for the swinging locks of yellow catkins. Plant it, streel head in the rain. Oh boy, planting the alder. Oh. And then a different sort of poem, the end of a tree's life, I guess. A hagging match. Axe thumps outside like wave hits through a night ferry. You whom I cling to, hew to, splitting firewood. Oh, a sense of occasion. The way he celebrates such a menial, simple task as cutting firewood. Oh, and just breathes into the poem such meaning, such angst. It's an astounding effort, I think. And this is the final poem that I will read of Heaney, The Birch Grove. At the back of a garden, in earshot of river water, in a corner, walled off like the baths or bakehouse of an unroofed abbey or broken-floored Roman villa, they have planted their birch grove, planted it recently only, but already each morning it puts forth in the sun, like their own long grown-up sleeves, the white of the bark, as suffused and cool as the white of the satin nightdress. She bends and straightens up in pouring tea, sitting across from where he dandles, a sandal on his right time-keeping foot, as bare as an abbot's, red brick and slate, plume tree, an apple to retain their credibility. A CD of bark is making the rounds of the common or garden air. Above them a jet trail tapers and waves like a willow wand or a taper. If art teaches us anything, he says, trumping life with a quote, it's that the human condition is private. Oh, what an understated, beautiful way to bring such a richly dramatic and evocative poem to a close. Seamus Heaney, the mature Seamus Heaney, District and Circle. And what came after? I thought I might read one poem by our contemporary Irish poet, Paul Muldoon, from his book called Maggot. This is a very unexpected sort of poem from Paul Muldoon in many ways, but it's a beautiful poem, really attuned to a real fine sense of eco-criticism. This is a marvellous eco-poetic poem. It's called Charles Baudelaire, The Albatross. And it begins with a short quote from a BBC News story. About 1/3 of all albatross chicks die on Midway, many as a result of being mistakenly fed plastic by their parents. Many albatrosses are found to have swallowed disposable cigarette lighters, which look remarkably similar to their staple food of squid. Oh boy, what a heartbreaking story. This is the trigger for this particular poem by Paul Muldoon. Again and again, for a little light relief, the crew pulls in and pinions an albatross, one of those great ocean-going birds that are effortless companions to a ship attempting the abyss by its own effortless motion. Barely has he been flung down the planks than this lord of the blue is lamed and ashamed. He piddles along with 2 white wings hanging from his flanks, like a pitiable pair of paddles. This winged voyager, how unwieldy he is, how weak. Now, no time ago we found only felicity, now we find only fault. One crewman forces a dudeen into his beak. Another mimics the former high flyer, who's now all but halt. The poet is not unlike the prince of the clouds, who rode out the storm and suffered the slings and arrows, exiled on dry land amid the jeering crowds. Again and again he's dragged down by the weight of all those wings. Oh, what a desperate poem, informed by that eco-poetics, the damage that humans are doing to the planet, the only planet we will ever have. Paul Muldoon, what a marvellous way to riff off so many of Seamus Heaney's own concerns for the planet, for the rhythm, the season, the cycles of the seasons. It's such a poetry so infused with the soil, with the natural world. This is an amazing poetry. So this is my opening contribution to the Celtophile Readathon for 2025. I have called it The Love of Ache, or The Ache of Love. A poetics of reimagining, if you like, the Celtic spirit, the Celtic imagination. I hope you enjoy spending a little bit of time with me and James Joyce, Seamus Heaney, and Paul Muldoon. Thank you, and bye for now.